She was chained to the whipping post like a dog waiting for the final blow. Her back already striped with blood. Her wrists locked in iron cuffs above her head. Her knees buckled beneath her weight. And the September sun over Prescott County, Arizona Territory, burned down on her skin with no mercy left to give. Jane Lowell was 24 years old, and she had stopped begging hours ago. Only shallow gasps came from her now. Every breath sounded like it might be the last one she could afford. She had been there since dawn, left in the center of the town square where every man, woman, and child could see what happened to someone who crossed County Judge Marcus Hawley. The post was old oak, weathered gray, stained dark from others who had hung there before her, her bare feet pressed against the hot dirt. Her toes curled, trying to find balance, trying to hold just a little longer. The dress she wore hung in tatters around her shoulders, torn open across the back where the lash had done its work. Blood trickled slow and steady down her spine, pooling at the base of the post where flies had already begun to gather. Jane had known there would be consequences for what she did. She just never imagined punishment would look like this. She thought they would lock her away in some dark cell and forget about her. Not put her on display in the middle of Prescott like a lesson carved into flesh. Not let the whole county watch her suffer while they went about their shopping and their gossip. Her head hung forward, her dark hair matted to her face with sweat and dust. She could taste copper in her mouth, could feel the way her heartbeat slowed with every passing minute. The square was not empty. People passed by. Some stared. Some looked away. None of them stopped. Then came the sound of hooves, steady, unhurried, moving up the main road from the direction of the hills, where the pines grew thick and the creek still ran cold, even in late summer. Lucas Mountain Heart rode into Prescott County with a string of pelts tied across his saddle and a rifle resting easy across his lap. He was Modoc, 32 years old. Tall and lean with eyes that had seen too much and said too little. He had been in the high country for 3 weeks, hunting elk, trapping beaver, living quiet the way he preferred. He came into town only when he needed supplies or when the pelts were worth enough to trade. He did not like towns much. Too many people. Too many rules that changed depending on who was holding the gavel. Lucas guided his horse past the general store, past the saloon, past the feed yard where a group of men stood talking and laughing like nothing in the world was wrong. Then he saw her. He pulled the reins without thinking. The horse stopped. His hand tightened on the saddle horn. At first, he thought she might already be dead. The way her body sagged, the way her head hung forward, the way the blood had dried in dark streaks down her back. But then she moved. Just barely. A shudder ran through her shoulders, a faint twitch in her fingers. She was still alive. Lucas swung down from the saddle. His boots hit the dirt hard. He walked toward the post slowly, his eyes locked on the woman chained there. Up close, he could see the bruises on her arms, the cuts on her wrists from where the iron had bitten into her skin, the way her ribs pressed too sharp against her sides like she had not eaten in days. He reached out. His fingers hovered just above her shoulder. He did not touch her yet, did not want to add to her pain, but he needed to know if she could still hear him. If there was anything left inside her that could fight back. Her head lifted, slow, painful, her eyes opened. They were gray, dull, hollowed out by suffering. She looked at him like she was looking through fog, like she could not quite believe anyone was standing there at all. Her voice came out broken, cracked, barely more than a whisper. Do not do this." Lucas froze. Not because of the words, but because of the way she said them. Like she thought he was there to finish what someone else had started. Like mercy was a language she no longer understood. He crouched down in front of her, his voice low and steady. "I am not here to hurt you," she blinked. Tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks. Then leave. Before they come back. Before they see you here. Lucas looked around the square. A few people had stopped to watch now. Their faces blank. Their eyes cold. No one moved to help. No one said a word. It was like watching her suffer had become part of the daily routine. Something normal. Something acceptable. His jaw tightened. He stood up and walked around the post. He studied the lock on the cuffs. Studied the chain that held her wrists above her head. Studied the marks on her back where the whip had torn her open. And in that moment, Lucas Mountain-Hairt knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever this woman had done, nothing could justify this. He pulled a small iron pick from his belt. The kind he used for traps. For locks on gates. For things that needed opening when no one wanted them open. He slid it into the lock on the cuffs and worked it slow and careful. The mechanism clicked. Once. Twice. Then it gave. The cuffs fell open. Jane collapsed forward. Lucas caught her before she hit the ground. Her weight slammed into his chest. She gasped. Air tearing into her lungs like it burned. Her legs would not hold her at all. If he had come an hour later, she might already have been gone. He lifted her. One arm behind her back. One arm under her knees. She was light. Too light for a woman her age. He carried her away from the post. Away from the square. Away from the eyes that watched but did nothing. He moved quick but careful. His boots crunching over the dry dirt. His horse waiting where he left it. Behind him, a voice called out. Sharp. Angry. You there, Hunter. Put her back. Lucas did not stop. Did not turn around. He set Jane down in the shade of a wooden awning outside the closed blacksmith shop. He gave her water from his canteen. Slow sips, small amounts. Waited until her eyes could focus again before he even thought about moving her anywhere else. Up close, she did not look like a monster. Just a scared woman with a stubborn set to her jaw and eyes that refused to stay closed even when the pain became too much. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. But she was still breathing. I stole from him, she whispered. From Judge Hawley. I went into his office. Opened his lockbox. Took his money. Lucas said nothing for a moment. Her confession sat heavy in his chest. So she really was a thief. The judge had not lied about that part. But stealing did not earn a woman this. Not in any law, he understood. He looked back toward the square. 3 men were walking toward them now. 2 deputies in dusty vests and wide-brimmed hats. And behind them, a man in a black coat and polished boots. Judge Marcus Hawley, 50 years old, clean-shaven, cold-eyed. The kind of man who believed his word was law. Because no one had ever told him otherwise, Lucas stood up. He positioned himself between Jane and the men walking toward them. His hand rested easy on the handle of his knife. Not a threat. Just a reminder that he was not unarmed. Not afraid, Judge Hawley stopped a few feet away. His eyes moved from Lucas to Jane and back again. He smiled. It was thin, sharp. The kind of smile that never reached anywhere near his eyes. That woman is a thief, Hawley said. His voice smooth, practiced. She stole from me. The law demands she pay for that crime. You have no right to interfere. Lucas met his gaze without blinking. The law does not demand you leave her to die in the sun like an animal. Hale's smile faded. She is being punished according to the law of this county. A law I uphold. A law you will respect. Respect, Lucas said quietly. That what you call this? One of the deputies stepped forward. His hand on his gun. You need to step aside, Hunter. This is county business. Lucas did not move. Did not flinch. He had faced down men with guns before. Had faced down wolves and bears and storms that tried to kill him in the mountains. He was not about to back down now. Jane's voice came from behind him, weak, trembling, but clear enough to hear. "He will kill you if you do not give me back." Lucas glanced at her. Then back at the judge. "If your law needs a woman beaten half to death to work, then your law is broken." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The deputies had their hands on their guns. The judge's face had gone hard as stone. And Lucas stood there between them and Jane, knowing full well that what happened next might cost him everything. Judge Hale took a step forward. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "You are making a mistake, Hunter. One you will regret." Lucas did not answer. He just stared back, steady, unmoving. The kind of silence that said more than words ever could. Finally, the judge turned to his deputies. "Let him go. For now. But if he takes her out of this county, I will have him hunted down and hanged for aiding a criminal." The deputies hesitated, then stepped back. The judge gave Lucas one last look, cold, calculating. Then he turned and walked back toward the courthouse. The deputies followed. But Lucas knew this was not over. Not by a long shot. He crouched down beside Jane again. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow. He touched her shoulder gently. "Can you ride?" She nodded, barely. "If you help me." Lucas lifted her again. This time he set her carefully on his horse. She slumped forward against the saddle horn. He swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady, the other hand on the reins. The horse started moving, slow at first, then faster as they left the square behind. They followed the river road out of Prescott, the sun sinking low behind the hills, shadows stretching long across the valley. Jane leaned back against Lucas's chest. Every breath she took came with a wince. But she did not complain, did not ask him to stop. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Somewhere he cannot reach you," Lucas answered. "No such place exists," she said. Lucas did not argue, because deep down he knew she might be right. Judge Hale was not the kind of man who let things go. Not when his authority had been challenged in front of the whole town. Not when a half-Modoc hunter had made him look weak. By the time they reached the edge of the pine forest, the sky had turned deep purple. Stars beginning to show. The air cooling fast. Lucas guided the horse off the main road and onto a narrow trail that wound up into the hills. A trail most people did not know about. A trail that led to a small cabin he kept for winter trapping. The cabin was one room. Stone fireplace. Wooden floor. A single window facing east. It was not much, but it was hidden. And for now, that was all that mattered. Lucas helped Jane down from the horse. She could barely stand. He half carried her inside and laid her down on the cot near the fireplace. He poured water from a clay jug into a tin cup and brought it to her lips. She drank, slow, careful, like she was afraid it might be taken away. He knelt beside her and studied the wounds on her back. They were bad. Deep in some places. Already starting to fester in others. He needed to clean them. Needed to keep infection from spreading. But he knew it was going to hurt. "This will not be easy," he said quietly. Jane turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were clearer now, stronger. "Nothing about this has been easy," Lucas nodded. He stood and moved to the small shelf where he kept his supplies. He pulled down a jar of salve made from pine resin and bear fat. A clean cloth. A bottle of whiskey he kept for cold nights and bad wounds. He poured some of the whiskey onto the cloth and brought it back to the cot. "I need to clean these," he said. "It is going to burn." Jane closed her eyes. Her hands gripped the edge of the cot. "Do it." Lucas pressed the cloth to her back. She gasped. Her whole body went rigid. But she did not cry out. Did not pull away. He worked as fast as he could, cleaning each wound, applying the salve, wrapping her torso with strips of cloth to keep the wounds covered. When he finished, she was shaking. tears streaming down her face. But she was still conscious, still breathing, still alive. He sat back on his heels, his hands stained with her blood, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had just done. He had saved her, but in doing so, he had made an enemy of the most powerful man in Prescott County. And that was a problem that was not going away. Jane's voice broke the silence, soft, tired, but determined. "You should not have done this. You should have left me there." Lucas looked at her. "I could not." "Why?" she asked. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because no one else would." Outside, the wind picked up. The trees swayed. And somewhere far off in the darkness, a wolf howled. Lucas stood and moved to the window. He looked out at the valley below, at the distant lights of Prescott County, at the road that wound back toward the town square where Jane had hung in chains. He knew Judge Hawley would come looking for her, knew the deputies would ride out at first light, knew that every minute they stayed here brought them closer to being found. But for tonight, Jane was safe. For tonight, she could rest. And for tonight, that would have to be enough. Morning came cold to the cabin in the pines. Lucas had not slept much. He kept watch through the night, listening for horses, for voices, for any sign that Judge Hale's men had picked up their trail. But the forest stayed quiet. Only the wind moving through the trees and the occasional call of a night bird broke the silence. Jane woke with the first light, her body stiff, her wounds aching with every small movement. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. A sharp pain tore through her back. She gasped and fell back against the thin pillow. Lucas was at her side in an instant. He had been sitting near the fireplace, cleaning his rifle. "Do not move too fast," he said. "Those wounds need time." Jane turned her head to look at him, her face pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "How long was I asleep?" "Most of the night," Lucas answered. He set the rifle aside and moved to the water bucket near the door. He filled a cup and brought it to her. "Drink this. You lost a lot of blood yesterday." She took the cup with trembling hands, drank slowly. The water was cold, clear. It tasted better than anything she remembered. When she finished, she handed the cup back to him and met his eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did. For bringing me here." Lucas nodded. He did not know what to say to that. He had done what felt right, what felt necessary. But gratitude made him uncomfortable, made him feel like he had done something noble when all he had done was refuse to look away. Jane shifted slightly on the cot, winced, then spoke again, her voice stronger now. "You need to know something. About why I stole from Judge Hawley." Lucas sat down on the wooden stool near the fireplace. He folded his hands, waited. He had wondered about that since she first told him. Wondered what could drive a woman to steal from a man like Marcus Hawley, a man who held power over an entire county, a man who could have her whipped in the town square without anyone lifting a finger to stop him. Jane took a breath. It hurt. She could feel the pull of the wounds on her back. But she pushed through it. "I worked in his house for 2 years, cooking, cleaning, taking care of his horses. He paid me almost nothing. But I needed the work. I had nowhere else to go." Lucas listened, did not interrupt. "Just let her talk." "6 months ago," Jane continued, "a man came to the house. He was not from Prescott. He was a land surveyor, worked for the territorial government. He had papers with him, maps, documents that showed property lines and water rights for the whole county." She paused, her hands clenched into fists. "Judge Hawley invited him in, offered him whiskey. They talked for hours in the study. I brought them supper, cleaned up after them. I did not think much of it at the time. Just another visitor. Just another meeting." Lucas leaned forward slightly. What happened? Jane's eyes darkened. The next morning, I found the surveyor dead. In the barn. His throat cut. His saddlebags gone. Judge Halley told everyone the man had been attacked by drifters on the road. That his body had been found near the river. That it was a tragedy but not uncommon in these parts. A chill ran down Lucas's spine. But you knew different, Jane nodded. I saw the blood in the barn. I saw Judge Halley burning papers in the fireplace that same morning. Papers with the territorial seal on them. And I saw him lock a leather case in his office. A case that had not been there before. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "So you broke into his office?" "I did," Jane said. Her voice steady now, defiant. "I waited until he went to Santa Fe for a week. I picked the lock on his office door. I found the case. Inside were the surveyor's documents. Maps showing water rights for the Verde River. Proof that the land Judge Halley claimed as his own actually belonged to the Yavapai families who had been living there for generations." Lucas's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors about Judge Halley forcing families off their land, claiming water rights that were not his, using the law to steal what he could not take by force. But he had never had proof, never had reason to believe the rumors were more than talk. "I took the documents," Jane said. "And I took the money from his lockbox. Not because I wanted it, but because I knew if I left it, he would just use it to bribe more officials, to pay off more deputies, to keep doing what he had been doing." She looked at Lucas, her eyes hard. "I was going to take those papers to the territorial marshal in Flagstaff. I was going to show him what Judge Halley had done. But I never made it out of Prescott. One of his deputies caught me before I reached the edge of town. They dragged me back. They chained me to that post. And Judge Halley himself took the whip to my back." Lucas stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the forest, his mind racing. If what Jane said was true, then Judge Halley was not just corrupt. He was a murderer, a land thief, a man who would kill to protect his power. "Where are the documents now?" Lucas asked. Jane's face fell. "Gone. Judge Halley burned them. Right in front of me. Before he had me chained up. He wanted me to know that no one would ever believe me. That I was just a thief. A liar. A woman with no proof and no voice." Silence filled the cabin. Heavy, oppressive. Lucas turned back to face her. "So we have nothing. We have my word," Jane said. "And we have the truth." Lucas shook his head. "Your word will not hold up against his. Not in Prescott. Not in any town where he has influence. And the truth does not matter if no one is willing to hear it." Jane's eyes filled with tears. But she blinked them back. Refused to let them fall. "Then what do we do?" Lucas did not have an answer. Not yet. He moved back to the stool and sat down, his mind working through the problem. They could not stay here forever. The cabin was hidden but not invisible. Sooner or later, someone would find them. Sooner or later, Judge Halley would send men into the hills. "We need proof," Lucas said finally. "Something more than words. Something that cannot be burned or denied." Jane looked at him. "How?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The surveyor." "Where did Judge Halley say his body was found?" "Near the river," Jane answered. "About 5 miles south of town. Near the old crossing where the cottonwoods grow thick." Lucas nodded. "If the surveyor was killed in the barn, then his body was moved. And if it was moved, there might still be evidence. Blood, tools, something that proves he died on Judge Hale's property and not on the road." Jane's eyes widened. "You want to go back?" "I want to find the truth," Lucas said. "And if the truth is still there, buried in that barn, then we find it. We take it to someone who has more power than Judge Halley, someone who cannot be bought or threatened." "Who?" Jane asked. Everyone in Prescott answers to him, the territorial marshal, Lucas said. In Flagstaff. If we can get proof to him, real proof, then Judge Hawley cannot hide anymore. Jane stared at him. That is a 2-day ride. Through open country. With every deputy in Prescott looking for us. Lucas met her gaze. I know. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Why are you doing this? You could leave me here. Right away. Forget you ever saw me." Lucas leaned back. His eyes distant. My mother was Modoc, my father was white. A trapper. When I was a boy, soldiers came to our village. They said we had to leave. That the land was not ours anymore. My mother refused. She said the land had been ours for longer than any white man had been alive. He paused. His voice low. They shot her. Right in front of me. And when my father tried to stop them, they shot him too. They said it was legal. They said it was the law. And no one did anything to stop them. Jane's breath caught. Lucas, I was 8 years old, Lucas continued. I survived because an old trapper found me in the woods. Took me in, taught me to hunt. To survive. But I never forgot what happened. Never forgot the way the law can be twisted. The way it can be used to hurt people who have no power to fight back. He looked at Jane. So when I see someone suffering under that same kind of law, I cannot walk away. I cannot pretend I do not see it. Even if it costs me everything. Jane's eyes were wet now. Tears spilling down her cheeks. I am sorry. For what happened to you. For what you lost. Lucas shook his head. I am not telling you this for sympathy. I am telling you so you understand why I am willing to do this. Why I will not let Judge Hawley win. Jane wiped her eyes, nodded. Then we go back. We find the proof. And we make sure everyone knows what he did. Lucas stood. Not we, you stay here. You are in no condition to ride. I will go to the barn. I will find what we need. Then I will come back. Jane tried to sit up. Pain shot through her back. She gritted her teeth. No, I am going with you. This is my fight. You can barely stand, Lucas said. Then help me stand. Jane shot back. Her voice fierce. I will not hide here while you risk your life for something I started. If we are doing this, we are doing it together. Lucas stared at her. Saw the determination in her eyes. The fire that had not been beaten out of her, despite everything she had endured. He knew there was no point in arguing. She was going. Whether he agreed or not. Fine, he said. But we do this my way. We move slow. We stay out of sight. And if anything goes wrong, you do exactly what I say. Understood, Jane nodded. Understood. Lucas moved to the corner of the cabin where he kept his supplies. He pulled out a leather satchel. Filled it with dried meat, hardtack, and a canteen of water. He checked his rifle. Made sure it was loaded. Then he turned back to Jane. We leave at dusk, he said. That gives us cover. And it gives you time to rest. You will need your strength. Jane lay back down on the cot. Her body exhausted. But her mind sharp, focused. Lucas, he looked at her. Thank you, she said again. For believing me. For not walking away. Lucas did not answer. He just nodded. Then he moved back to the window. Back to watching the trail. Back to waiting for the moment when they would have to step back into the fire. The hours passed slowly. The sun climbed high. Then began its descent. Lucas cleaned his knife. Checked the horses. Made sure everything was ready. Jane slept fitfully. Her dreams filled with the crack of the whip and the cold eyes of Judge Marcus Hawley. When the light began to fade, Lucas woke her gently. It is time. Jane sat up, slowly, carefully. The wounds on her back screamed in protest. But she pushed through it. Lucas helped her to her feet. Helped her into a clean shirt he had found in his pack. It was too big for her. But it was better than the torn dress she had been wearing. They stepped outside. The air was cool now. The forest dark. Lucas helped Jane onto the horse. Then he swung up behind her, his arm around her waist, his other hand on the reins. The horse started moving. Down the narrow trail. Back toward the valley. Back toward Prescott County. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. They both knew what they were riding into. They both knew the risk. But they also knew they could not turn back. Not now. Not when the truth was still out there.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Waiting to be found, the stars came out. Bright and cold. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Long and mournful. Like a warning. Or a prayer. They reached the outskirts of Prescott just after midnight. The town was dark. Most windows shuttered. Only a few lanterns still burned in the saloon and the judge's courthouse at the far end of the square. Lucas guided the horse off the main road and into a dry wash that ran parallel to the town. The wash was deep enough to hide them. Narrow enough that the horse could move through without making too much noise. Jane held onto the saddle horn with both hands. Every jolt sent pain shooting through her back. But she did not complain. Did not ask Lucas to slow down. She knew they were running out of time. Knew that every second they spent in the open brought them closer to being discovered. Lucas pulled the horse to a stop near a cluster of twisted juniper trees. He dismounted. Helped Jane down. She stood on shaky legs, her breath coming in short bursts. He steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. Judge Hale's property is just beyond that ridge, Lucas said quietly. He pointed east toward a low rise silhouetted against the starlight. The barn is on the north side, away from the main house. That is where we need to go, Jane nodded. What about his men? He keeps 2 deputies on the property at night, Lucas said. 1 at the house. 1 near the stables. We stay low. We move quiet. We get in. We get what we need. Then we get out. He pulled a small oil lantern from his saddlebag. The kind with a shuttered door that could be opened and closed to control the light. He handed it to Jane. You carry this. I will lead the way. They moved through the wash, their boots crunching softly on the gravel. The night air was cold now, sharp. It smelled like sage and dust and the faint trace of wood smoke from distant fires. Above them, the stars stretched across the sky in a river of light. So many stars that it almost hurt to look at them. When they reached the edge of Judge Hale's property, Lucas crouched down behind a low stone wall. Jane knelt beside him, her breathing heavy, her hands gripping the lantern so tight her knuckles had gone white. The main house was a large adobe structure. 2 stories. Wide veranda. Windows glowing faintly from the lamps inside. Lucas could see the silhouette of a man standing on the porch. A deputy, rifle resting across his shoulder. He was smoking. The red glow of his cigarette moving back and forth in the darkness. There, Lucas whispered. He pointed toward a smaller building about 50 yards to the north. The barn. It was old, weathered, the kind of structure that had been standing for decades and would probably stand for decades more. The doors were closed. No light came from inside. How do we get past the deputy? Jane asked. Lucas studied the ground between them and the barn. There was a narrow path, lined with scrub brush and a few scattered cottonwood trees. If they stayed low and moved during the moments when the deputy turned away, they might make it. We wait, Lucas said. We watch his pattern. Then we move when he is not looking. They waited. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The deputy on the porch paced, stopped, paced again. Every few minutes he would turn and look out toward the barn. Then he would turn back toward the house. It was a routine, predictable, and that was what Lucas needed. Now, Lucas whispered. They moved. Fast, low. Jane's legs screamed in protest. Her back burned with every step. But she kept pace with Lucas. They reached the first cottonwood. Crouched behind it, waited. The deputy turned toward the house. Lucas motioned forward. They ran again. Reached the scrub brush. Dropped flat. The deputy turned back toward the barn, his eyes scanning the darkness. Lucas pressed his hand on Jane's shoulder, held her still. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the sweat trickling down her spine despite the cold. The deputy took another drag from his cigarette. Then he turned and walked back into the house. The door closed behind him. Lucas exhaled, slowly. Move. They crossed the final stretch to the barn. Lucas tried the door. It was barred from the inside. He pulled his knife and worked the blade between the wooden slats. Found the crossbar. Lifted it. The door creaked open just enough for them to slip inside. The barn was dark. It smelled like hay and horses and something else. Something faint but unmistakable. The smell of old blood. Jane opened the shutter on the lantern. A thin beam of light cut through the darkness. Lucas took the lantern from her and moved deeper into the barn. There were 3 stalls on the left side. Empty now. A hayloft above. A workbench along the back wall with tools hanging from rusted nails. Lucas moved to the center of the barn. Knelt down. Ran his hand over the dirt floor. Here, he said quietly. Jane moved to his side. The light from the lantern fell on the ground where Lucas's hand rested. The dirt was darker there, stained, even after 6 months. The blood had left its mark. Lucas stood and moved to the workbench. He studied the tools. A hammer. A saw. A hatchet with a chipped blade. He picked up the hatchet. Turned it over in his hands. The handle was old, worn, but near the base there was a dark stain. He held it up to the light. This is it, he said. This is what he used. Jane stared at the hatchet. Her stomach turned. Are you sure? Lucas nodded. Blood does not wash out of wood that easy. And look at the edge. It has been cleaned. But whoever did it missed this spot near the handle. He wrapped the hatchet in a piece of cloth and tucked it into his belt. We need more. Something that ties Judge Hawley directly to this. Jane moved toward the back of the barn, her eyes searching, the lantern light casting long shadows across the walls. She stopped near a stack of old crates. Something caught her eye. A piece of leather. Half buried under a pile of straw, she knelt down. Pulled it free. It was a saddlebag, old, weather-beaten, but still intact. She opened it. Inside were papers, folded maps, letters with the territorial seal stamped across the top. Lucas, she whispered. He was at her side in an instant. He took the saddlebag from her, unfolded one of the maps, his eyes scanning the lines and markings. This is it. This is the surveyor's map. The one showing the water rights. Jane's breath caught. He did not burn everything. He must have missed this, Lucas said. Or he thought it was not important. Either way, this is what we need. A sound came from outside. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving toward the barn. Lucas's head snapped up. He closed the shutter on the lantern. The barn went dark. He grabbed Jane's hand, pulled her toward the back corner. They crouched behind the stack of crates, hearts pounding. Barely breathing, the barn door creaked open. Light spilled in from a torch held high. The deputy stepped inside. He was younger than the one on the porch. Maybe 25. Lean, nervous. He held the torch in one hand and a pistol in the other. "Anyone in here?" he called out, his voice shaky. "I heard something. I know someone is in here." Lucas's hand moved to his knife. Slow, silent, he could feel Jane trembling beside him. Could feel her fear like a living thing in the darkness. He leaned close to her ear, whispered so low it was almost nothing. "Stay quiet." The deputy moved deeper into the barn, his torch casting wild shadows across the walls. He checked the stalls, checked the hayloft ladder, his pistol raised, ready to fire. "If you are in here, you better show yourself," the deputy said, his voice louder now, more confident. "Judge Halley does not take kindly to trespassers," Lucas watched from the shadows. The deputy was moving toward the back corner, toward the crates, toward them. In another few seconds, he would see them. And when he did, everything would fall apart. Lucas made a decision. He stood up, fast. The deputy spun toward him, torch raised, pistol aimed. Lucas threw his knife. It was a move he had practiced 1,000 times, hunting, surviving. The blade flew straight and true. It struck the deputy's hand. The pistol fell. The deputy screamed, dropped the torch. Lucas was on him before he could recover. He slammed the deputy against the wall, one hand over his mouth, the other pinning his arm behind his back. "Do not make a sound," Lucas hissed. The deputy struggled, eyes wide with terror. Lucas tightened his grip. "I do not want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." "Not if you understand," the deputy nodded, frantic, desperate. Lucas released his mouth but kept his arm pinned. "How many men are on the property tonight?" The deputy gasped for breath. "3, me, another deputy at the house, and Judge Halley himself." "Where is the judge now?" Lucas demanded. "Asleep," the deputy said. "In his room. 2nd floor." Lucas looked back at Jane. She had picked up the torch from where it had fallen, her face pale but steady. She nodded. They had what they came for. Now they needed to leave. Lucas pulled the deputy away from the wall, shoved him toward the front of the barn. "You are going to walk out of here. You are going to tell your friend at the house that everything is fine, that you saw a coyote. Nothing more. If you do anything else, if you so much as look back, I will put this knife through your spine. Do you understand?" The deputy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand." Lucas pushed him toward the door. The deputy stumbled outside. Lucas watched from the shadows, watched as the deputy walked back toward the house, watched as he spoke to someone on the porch, watched as both men went inside and closed the door. Lucas exhaled, turned back to Jane. "We need to go. Now." They slipped out of the barn, moved back through the scrub brush, back across the open ground, back toward the wash where the horse waited. Every step felt like it took an eternity. Every sound felt like a gunshot. But they made it. Lucas helped Jane onto the horse, climbed up behind her. The horse started moving, fast, urgent. They followed the wash east, away from Prescott, away from Judge Hale's property, away from the town square where Jane had hung in chains. Behind them, lights began to flicker on in the main house. Voices shouted. The deputy must have told them, must have raised the alarm. Lucas urged the horse faster. They broke out of the wash and onto open ground. The horse galloped, hooves pounding against the hard earth. Jane looked back over her shoulder. She could see torches now, moving, spreading out, searching. "They are coming." Lucas did not answer. He just leaned forward, pushed the horse harder. The wind tore at their faces. The night rushed past in a blur of shadows and starlight. And somewhere behind them, Judge Marcus Halley was waking to the news that his secrets had been stolen. They rode for hours, through valleys and over ridges, past dry creek beds and through stands of pine. Lucas did not stop until the first hint of dawn began to touch the eastern sky. He pulled the horse to a halt near a rocky outcrop, a place where they could see anyone approaching from miles away. Jane slid down from the saddle. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees. Lucas caught her, helped her to a flat rock where she could sit. She was shaking, exhausted, but alive. Lucas pulled the saddlebag from his belt, opened it, spread the maps and papers out on the ground. In the growing light, he could see the territorial seal, could see the surveyor's signature at the bottom of each document, could see the proof that Judge Hawley had killed a man and stolen land that did not belong to him. "We have it," Lucas said quietly. "We have everything we need." Jane looked at the papers, then at Lucas. "What now?" Lucas folded the documents carefully, tucked them back into the saddlebag. "Now we ride to Flagstaff. We find the territorial marshal, and we make sure Judge Hawley answers for what he did." Jane nodded, but her eyes were distant, haunted. "He will not let us reach Flagstaff. You know that. He will send every man he has after us." Lucas met her gaze. "I know, but we do not have a choice. This is the only way." The sun broke over the horizon, gold and red and burning. A new day, but not a safe one. Not yet. Lucas helped Jane back onto the horse. They rode north, toward Flagstaff, toward justice, toward a reckoning that had been a long time coming, and behind them, Judge Marcus Hawley gathered his men, his face dark with rage, his voice cold with purpose. "Find them. Bring me the girl. And kill the hunter. I do not care how." The Verde Valley stretched out before them like a painting done in shades of rust and gold. Lucas and Jane had been riding hard since dawn. The horse was beginning to tire, its breath coming in heavy bursts, foam gathering at the edges of its mouth. Lucas knew they would need to rest soon, but every instinct told him to keep moving, to put as much distance between them and Prescott County as possible. Jane had barely spoken since they left the rocky outcrop. Her body swayed with the rhythm of the horse, her eyes half closed. The wounds on her back had started bleeding again. Lucas could feel the dampness soaking through her shirt, could see the way she gritted her teeth with every jolt. But she did not complain, did not ask him to stop. They followed a narrow trail that wound through stands of juniper and pinyon pine. The trail was old, used mostly by hunters and trappers. Not many people knew about it. That was why Lucas chose it. The main road to Flagstaff would be watched. Judge Hawley would have men stationed at every crossing, every town, every water stop. This trail was longer, harder, but it was their best chance. By midday, the sun was merciless. It beat down on them with a heat that seemed to pull the moisture right out of their skin. Lucas spotted a small canyon ahead, a place where the rocks formed a natural shelter, a place where water might still be pooling from the last rain. He guided the horse toward it. They dismounted in the shade of a massive red rock wall. Lucas helped Jane down. She collapsed against the stone, her face pale, her breathing shallow. He unsaddled the horse and let it drink from a small pool of water trapped in a depression in the rock. Then he filled his canteen and brought it to Jane. "Drink," he said. She took the canteen with trembling hands, drank deeply. Water spilled down her chin. She did not care. When she finished, she handed it back to him and closed her eyes. "I am slowing you down." Lucas shook his head. "You are not." "I am," Jane insisted, her voice weak but firm. "You could move faster without me. You could reach Flagstaff by tomorrow night if you rode alone." Lucas knelt beside her. "I am not leaving you." Jane opened her eyes, looked at him. "Why, you barely know me. You have already risked everything. Your life, your freedom. For what? For someone who stole from a judge and got caught. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My mother used to tell me a story about a hunter who found a wolf caught in a trap. The wolf was dying, bleeding. It would have been easier for the hunter to walk away, to let nature take its course. But the hunter could not do it. He freed the wolf. And the wolf remembered." Jane stared at him. "What happened? Years later," Lucas continued. "The hunter was caught in a blizzard, lost, freezing. He thought he was going to die. Then the wolf appeared. It led him to a cave, stayed with him through the night, kept him warm, kept him alive. My mother said that kindness is never wasted, that it always comes back. Maybe not in the way you expect, but it comes back." Jane's eyes filled with tears. "I am not a wolf. I cannot save you from a blizzard," Lucas smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but you are fighting. And that is enough." They rested for an hour. Lucas cleaned Jane's wounds as best he could with water and strips torn from his spare shirt. The bleeding had slowed, but infection was still a risk. He wished he had more supplies, more medicine, more time. But wishing would not change their situation. When they set out again, the sun had started its descent toward the western horizon. The heat began to ease. A breeze picked up from the north, cool and dry. It carried the scent of distant rain. Lucas hoped the rain would hold off, hoped they could reach the next water source before dark. They had been riding for about 2 hours when Lucas heard it. Faint at first, then growing louder. The sound of hooves. Multiple horses, moving fast, coming from the south. From the direction of Prescott, Lucas reined in the horse. Listened, counted, at least 4 riders. Maybe more. They were still a ways off, but they were closing the distance. Lucas looked around. The trail here was exposed. No cover, no place to hide. They needed to move. He urged the horse into a gallop. Jane gasped and grabbed the saddle horn, her body jerking with the sudden speed. Lucas pushed the horse harder. They veered off the main trail and into a maze of rock formations. Narrow passages between towering red stones. Places where the shadows ran deep and the air felt 10 degrees cooler. Behind them, the sound of hooves grew louder, closer. Lucas could hear voices now, shouting, calling out to each other. They had been spotted. The chase was on. Lucas guided the horse through a tight gap between 2 massive boulders. The passage was so narrow that his legs scraped against the stone. Jane ducked her head, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. They emerged on the other side into a small clearing surrounded by high rock walls. It was a dead end. Lucas cursed under his breath. He spun the horse around, looked for another way out. There was none. Only the passage they had just come through. And the riders were already there. Blocking the exit, 4 men on horseback. All armed. All wearing the dusty vests and wide-brimmed hats of Prescotty deputies. The lead rider was older, weathered, a scar running down the left side of his face. He smiled when he saw Lucas and Jane. It was not a kind smile. "Well now," the man said, his voice rough like gravel. "Looks like we found ourselves a hunter and a thief. Judge Holly is going to be real pleased." Lucas dismounted slowly, kept his hands visible, his mind racing. 4 armed men. 1 rifle. 1 knife. 1 exhausted woman. The odds were not good. "Let the woman go," Lucas said, his voice calm, steady. "She has done nothing wrong," the lead deputy laughed. "Nothing wrong. She stole from the judge. She broke the law. And you helped her. That makes you both criminals." Jane slid down from the horse, stood beside Lucas, her legs shaking but her jaw set. "I stole evidence of murder. Evidence that Judge Hale killed a territorial surveyor and took his maps. Evidence that proves he has been stealing land from families for years. The deputy's smile faded. That is a serious accusation. One you cannot prove. Lucas pulled the saddlebag from his belt. Held it up. We have the maps. We have the surveyor's papers. We have proof. And we are taking it to the territorial marshal in Flagstaff. The deputies exchanged glances. The lead man's hand moved to his gun. You are not taking anything anywhere. Hand over that bag. Now Lucas did not move. If you kill us, the truth will still come out. Someone will find these papers. Someone will ask questions. Judge Hale cannot hide forever, maybe, the deputy said. But he can hide long enough. And you two will not be around to tell your story. The deputy drew his gun, fast, smooth, aimed it straight at Lucas's chest. The other 3 deputies followed suit. 4 guns, 4 men. No way out. Jane stepped forward. Placed herself between Lucas and the guns. No, the lead deputy's eyes narrowed. Move aside, girl. This does not concern you anymore. It does, Jane said. Her voice shaking but strong. If you are going to shoot someone, shoot me. I am the one who stole from Judge Hale. I am the one who broke into his barn. Lucas only helped me because I was dying. He is innocent. Lucas grabbed her arm. Tried to pull her back. Jane, do not. She shook him off. Looked straight at the deputy with the gun. Let him go. Take me back to Prescott. I will tell the judge whatever he wants to hear. Just let Lucas live. The deputy stared at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Something almost like respect. But it passed quickly. Noble, but stupid. Judge Hale wants you both dead. And that is what he is going to get. He cocked the hammer on his gun. The sound echoed off the rock walls. Final. Absolute. Lucas reached for his knife. Knew it would not be enough. Knew they were out of time. Knew this was how it ended. Then a gunshot rang out, but it did not come from the deputy's gun. It came from somewhere above. From the rocks. The lead deputy jerked. Dropped his gun. Fell from his horse. Blood spreading across his chest. The other 3 deputies spun around. Confused, panicked. 2 more shots. 2 more deputies fell. The 4th deputy tried to run. His horse reared. He lost his grip. Hit the ground hard. Scrambled to his feet. Another shot. He went down. Silence fell over the clearing. Heavy. Oppressive. Lucas stared at the bodies. At the blood pooling in the dust. At Jane standing frozen beside him. Then he looked up. Toward the rocks where the shots had come from, a figure appeared. Silhouetted against the sky. A man, tall, lean, holding a rifle. He climbed down from the rocks with the easy movements of someone who had spent a lifetime in wild places. When he reached the ground, Lucas could see his face. He was older. Maybe 60. His hair gray. His skin weathered by sun and wind. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent. He wore buckskins and moccasins. A Yavapai pattern beaded in to his vest. He looked at Lucas, then at Jane, then at the bodies of the 4 deputies. You two make a lot of noise, the man said. His voice dry. Amused, Lucas did not know what to say. Did not know who this man was. Did not know if he was friend or foe. The man slung his rifle over his shoulder. Walked toward them. My name is Samuel Greyhawk. I have been tracking these men since yesterday. They rode onto my land without permission. Killed 2 of my goats. Threatened my family. Said they were looking for a thief and a hunter. He stopped a few feet away. Studied Lucas and Jane with eyes that missed nothing. I am guessing that would be you two. Lucas nodded slowly. We are trying to reach Flagstaff. We have evidence that Judge Marcus Hale murdered a territorial surveyor.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
We need to get it to the marshal. Greyhawk's expression darkened. Marcus Hale, that man has been stealing land from my people for 5 years, forcing families off their property, claiming water rights that do not belong to him, using the law like a weapon. He spat on the ground. I have been waiting for someone to stand up to him. Looks like you two finally did. Jane found her voice. You saved our lives. Why? Greyhawk looked at her. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And because no one should die for telling the truth. He walked over to the deputy's horses, gathered the reins, led them back to Lucas and Jane. Take these. Your horse is about done. You will need fresh mounts if you want to reach Flagstaff before more men come looking. Lucas hesitated. What about you? Judge Halley will know you killed his men. Greyhawk smiled. Let him know. I have been fighting men like him my whole life. One more fight does not scare me. He handed the reins to Lucas. There is a camp about 10 miles north of here. My son and his family live there. They will give you food and shelter for the night. Tell them I sent you. Tell them to help you reach the territorial road by morning. Jane stepped forward. Come with us. Help us bring Judge Hawley to justice. Greyhawk shook his head. My fight is here. Protecting my land. Protecting my family. Your fight is in Flagstaff, with the marshal. Do not waste the chance I just gave you. Lucas extended his hand. Greyhawk took it, their grip firm, respectful. Thank you, Lucas said. Greyhawk nodded. Go, before the sun sets. And when you reach the marshal, tell him Samuel Greyhawk says it is time someone held Marcus Hawley accountable. Lucas helped Jane onto one of the fresh horses. He mounted another. They rode out of the clearing, through the narrow passage between the boulders, back onto the trail heading north. Behind them, Greyhawk stood among the bodies of the 4 deputies, his rifle resting across his shoulder, his eyes watching them until they disappeared into the shadows. By the time the stars came out, Lucas and Jane had reached Greyhawk's camp, a cluster of small adobe homes nestled in a protected valley, smoke rising from cook fires. Children playing near a stream. Greyhawk's son greeted them with caution at first, then with warmth when Lucas explained who had sent them. They were given food, venison stew, fresh bread, water that tasted like it had come straight from a mountain spring. Jane's wounds were cleaned and rebandaged by Greyhawk's daughter-in-law, a woman with gentle hands and fierce eyes who asked no questions but understood everything. That night, Lucas and Jane slept in a small guest house at the edge of the camp. For the first time in days, Jane slept without pain, without fear. Lucas sat by the window, watching the stars, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that still lay ahead. Tomorrow they would reach the territorial road. Tomorrow they would ride for Flagstaff. Tomorrow they would face whatever came next. But tonight, they were safe. And that was enough. The territorial road to Flagstaff was wider than the trails they had been following, more exposed, but it was also faster. Lucas and Jane rode side by side now, their horses fresh from the rest at Greyhawk's camp. The morning air was cool, clean. It carried the scent of pine and distant rain, clouds gathering over the San Francisco peaks to the north. Jane sat straighter in the saddle today. Her wounds still hurt, but the night of rest and the care from Greyhawk's family had given her back some strength, some hope. She looked over at Lucas. He rode with his rifle across his lap, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Always watching, always ready. How far to Flagstaff? Jane asked. If we keep this pace, Lucas said, we should reach it by late afternoon. Maybe sooner if the weather holds. Jane nodded. She could see the peaks ahead, snow-capped even in September. They looked impossibly far away, but also closer than they had been yesterday. Closer than they had been when she was chained to that post in Prescott. Closer than when she thought she would die without anyone knowing the truth. They passed a freight wagon heading south. The driver tipped his hat, asked if they had seen any trouble on the road. Lucas said no, kept his answers short. The driver moved on. Jane noticed how Lucas's hand never left his rifle until the wagon was out of sight. "You think Judge Halley has men on this road?" Jane asked. "I think he has men everywhere," Lucas answered. "But we are past the point of turning back. We finish this. One way or another." The road climbed steadily. Through forests of ponderosa pine. Past rocky outcrops where ravens watched them with dark, intelligent eyes. The altitude made the air thinner. Jane found herself breathing harder, her chest tightening with each mile. But she pushed through it, refused to ask Lucas to slow down. By noon, they stopped at a small creek to water the horses and refill their canteens. Lucas studied the map Greyhawk's son had drawn for them. A simple sketch showing the road and the landmarks they would pass. According to the map, they were about halfway to Flagstaff. Jane knelt by the creek, splashed cold water on her face. It felt good, woke her up. She looked at her reflection in the water, barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was thinner, harder. Her eyes carried something they had not carried a week ago, something like determination. Or maybe just desperation. Lucas came and knelt beside her, filled his canteen. "How are you holding up?" Jane looked at him. "I keep thinking about what happens when we reach Flagstaff. What if the marshal does not believe us? What if Judge Haley has already sent word ahead? What if we rode all this way for nothing?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then we find someone who will believe us. We go to the territorial governor. We go to the newspapers. We do not stop until someone listens." Jane wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the world worked that way. That truth mattered more than power. That justice was more than just a word men used to justify cruelty. But she had seen too much, suffered too much, to believe it would be that simple. "What if we die before we get there?" Jane said quietly. "What if Judge Hale's men catch us first?" Lucas met her eyes. "Then we die knowing we tried, knowing we did not give up." "That is more than most people can say." Jane stared at him. Then she nodded. "All right. Let us finish this." They mounted their horses and continued north. The road narrowed as it climbed higher into the mountains. The trees grew thicker, the shadows deeper. Lucas kept them moving at a steady pace. Not too fast, not too slow. Conserving the horses' strength for whatever might come. An hour later, they rounded a bend and saw smoke rising ahead. Black, thick, the kind of smoke that came from burning wood and canvas. Lucas pulled his horse to a stop. Jane came up beside him. They stared at the smoke. "That is not a campfire," Jane said. Lucas shook his head. "No, that is something bigger." They approached cautiously. Lucas with his rifle ready, Jane with her heart pounding. As they got closer, they could see what was burning. A stagecoach, overturned in the middle of the road. The horses were gone, cut loose or stolen, the luggage scattered across the ground. Some of it still smoldering. Lucas dismounted, walked toward the wreckage. Jane stayed on her horse, her eyes wide, her hands gripping the reins so tight they hurt. Lucas moved around the stagecoach, checked inside. His face went pale. "Do not look," he said to Jane, but she had already seen. 2 bodies, a driver and a passenger, shot at close range, their blood soaking into the dirt. Jane turned away, pressed her hand to her mouth, fought the urge to be sick. Lucas searched the area, found tracks, boot prints, hoof prints, at least 6 men. They had come from the south, ambushed the stagecoach, killed everyone, then rode north. The same direction Lucas and Jane were heading. "This was recent," Lucas said. "Maybe an hour ago. Maybe less," Jane forced herself to look at him. Why would they do this? This stagecoach had nothing to do with us. Lucas studied the tracks again. Then it hit him. They are not after the stagecoach. They are setting up roadblocks, stopping everyone heading north. Looking for us. Jane's blood ran cold. So they are ahead of us now, Lucas nodded. And if they ambush this stagecoach, they will ambush anyone else who comes along. Including us. Jane looked at the bodies, at the smoke, at the destruction. What do we do? Lucas walked back to his horse. Mounted, we leave the road, cut through the forest. It will take longer, but it is our only chance. They turned their horses east, into the thick ponderosa forest that lined the road. The going was slower here. The trees grew close together. Fallen logs and rocky ground made every step treacherous, but they pushed on, weaving through the forest, parallel to the road, but hidden from view. They had been riding for maybe 30 minutes when they heard voices. Men, talking, laughing. Lucas held up his hand. They stopped. He dismounted, motioned for Jane to do the same. They tied the horses to a low branch and crept forward on foot. Through the trees, they could see the road again. And on the road, 6 men on horseback, all armed, all wearing the same dusty vests as the deputies they had encountered before. Judge Hale's men. They were stopped in the middle of the road, waiting. One of them was cleaning his gun. Another was drinking from a flask. They looked relaxed, confident. How long do we wait? One of them said. The leader, a man with a thick beard and cold eyes, answered, as long as it takes. Judge Haley wants them dead. And we do not go back until the job is done. Another man spat on the ground. What if they took another route? The leader shook his head. There is no other route. Not if they want to reach Flagstaff before dark. They will come this way. And when they do, we kill them both. No questions. No prisoners. Lucas felt Jane tense beside him. Her breathing shallow, her fists clenched. He touched her shoulder, shook his head. They could not fight 6 armed men. Not in the open. Not with the odds stacked this high. They backed away slowly, carefully, every step calculated to avoid snapping a twig or rustling leaves. When they were far enough away, they returned to their horses. Lucas thought fast. The road was blocked. The men were not moving. And daylight was burning. There is an old mining trail, Lucas said quietly. About 2 miles east of here. It runs north through the mountains. Comes out near Fort Valley. Just south of Flagstaff. It is rough, dangerous, but it is our only option. Jane nodded. Then we take it. They rode deeper into the forest. Away from the road. Away from Judge Hale's men. The ground grew steeper, rockier. The horses struggled to find footing. Jane held on tight as her horse stumbled over loose stones and exposed roots. More than once, she thought they were going to fall. But somehow they kept moving. The mining trail was exactly where Lucas said it would be. Barely visible. Overgrown with brush and small trees. It looked like no one had used it in years. Maybe decades. But the path was still there. Carved into the mountainside by men who had come looking for silver and copper and dreams of wealth. They followed the trail north. It climbed higher, switchbacking up the mountain. The air grew colder, thinner. Jane's lungs burned with every breath. Her wounds ached. Her body screamed for rest. But she did not stop. Did not complain. Just kept riding. Lucas glanced back at her. Saw the pain in her face. We are almost there. Just a few more miles. Jane nodded. Could not find the breath to speak. Just focused on staying in the saddle. On keeping her horse moving. On not giving up. The sun was sinking low when they finally crested the ridge. Below them, spread out in a wide valley, was Flagstaff. A small town. Maybe a few hundred people. But it had a courthouse, a marshal's office, and most importantly, It was outside Judge Hale's reach. Lucas pointed to a building on the main street. That is the territorial marshal's office. We go straight there. We do not stop. We do not talk to anyone else. They rode down the mountain. Into the valley. Onto the streets of Flagstaff. People stopped to stare. 2 riders. Dusty. Exhausted. One of them a woman with blood seeping through her shirt. The other a Modoc hunter with a rifle and eyes that had seen too much. Lucas guided them to the marshal's office. A small stone building with iron bars on the windows. He dismounted. Helped Jane down. She could barely stand. Her legs shook. Her vision blurred. But they had made it. Against all odds. They had made it. Lucas pushed open the door. Inside, a man sat behind a desk. He was in his 50s. Graying hair. Solid build. A badge pinned to his vest. He looked up when they entered. His eyes taking in their appearance. The blood. The exhaustion. The desperation. I am Territorial Marshal William Garrett, the man said. His voice calm but wary. What can I do for you? Lucas pulled the saddlebag from his belt. Set it on the desk. My name is Lucas Mountain Heart. This is Jane Lowell. We have evidence that Judge Marcus Hawley of Prescott County murdered a territorial surveyor named Thomas Brennan 6 months ago. We have maps, documents, proof that he has been stealing land and water rights from families across the territory. Marshal Garrett stood up, opened the saddlebag, pulled out the papers. His eyes scanned the documents. The territorial seal, the surveyor's signature, the map showing disputed land and water rights. His expression grew darker with every page. Where did you get these? Garrett asked. Jane stepped forward. Her voice hoarse but steady. From Judge Hale's barn, where he hid them after he killed Surveyor Brennan. I saw him do it. I heard the gunshot. I saw him wrap the body and take it to the river. And when I tried to bring you this evidence, he had me whipped and chained in the town square to die. Marshal Garrett looked at her. Really looked at her. At the wounds. At the scars. At the truth written in her eyes. Then he looked at Lucas. You can confirm this? Lucas nodded. I found her hanging in Prescott, dying. I cut her down. Judge Hilley sent his deputies after us. We have been running for 3 days. He killed 4 of his own men trying to stop us from reaching you. And he has 6 more waiting on the road south of here to make sure we never make it back alive. Marshal Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to the door. Called out to someone outside. A deputy appeared, young, eager. Ride to Fort Whipple, Garrett ordered. Tell Captain Morrison I need 10 soldiers. Armed, ready to ride within the hour. Tell him it is a matter of territorial law. The deputy nodded. Ran off. Garrett turned back to Lucas and Jane. You two need rest, food, medical attention. My wife runs a boarding house 2 streets over. Go there, tell her I sent you. I will handle this, Jane shook her head. We are going with you. Back to Prescott. We finish this, Garrett studied her. Saw the fire in her eyes. The determination. You are in no condition to ride. I do not care, Jane said. Judge Hawley tried to kill me. Tried to erase the truth. I am not letting him get away with it. I am seeing this through to the end. Marshal Garrett looked at Lucas. Lucas nodded. She has earned the right, Garrett sighed. All right. But you ride with the soldiers. You stay behind me. And you do exactly what I say. Understood. Jane and Lucas both nodded. Garrett turned back to the maps spread across his desk. His jaw tight. His eyes hard. Judge Marcus Hawley is about to learn that no one is above the law. Not in this territory. Not on my watch. Outside, the sun finally set. The stars came out. And somewhere to the south, Judge Marcus Hawley waited in his courthouse, confident, powerful, believing he had won. He had no idea that justice was riding north, with proof, with witnesses, and with a marshal who did not care how much power a man had if he was guilty. The autumn air in the high country carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. Lucas stood on the porch of the cabin he had built over the past 2 years. It was larger now than the simple trapper's shelter it had been when he first brought Jane here. 2 rooms instead of 1. A proper kitchen with a cast-iron stove. Windows that caught the morning light. A porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. Jane emerged from inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her hair was longer now, tied back with a strip of leather. Her face had filled out. The hollow, haunted look that had lived in her eyes for so long was gone, replaced by something quieter, something that looked like contentment. She handed 1 cup to Lucas and settled into the chair beside him. "The aspens are turning early this year," she said. Her voice carried the easy rhythm of someone who had finally learned to rest. "We might get snow before November," Lucas nodded. He sipped his coffee, black, strong, the way he had always preferred it. "I need to finish cutting firewood. Make sure we have enough stacked before the first storm," Jane smiled. "You always worry about the first storm." "And we always have more than enough," Lucas glanced at her, saw the teasing in her eyes. Better to have too much than too little. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the valley below turn gold and orange as the sun climbed higher. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents, hunting. 2 years ago, Jane would have flinched at the sight of a predator, would have seen death in everything. Now she just watched it with appreciation for the way it moved, the way it belonged to this place. A rider appeared on the trail leading up to the cabin. Lucas set down his cup. His hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the wall. But Jane touched his arm. "Wait, look at the way he sits. That is not someone coming with trouble." She was right. The rider moved slowly, deliberately, making himself visible from a distance, giving them time to recognize him. As he drew closer, Lucas saw the badge pinned to his vest. Territorial Marshal. But it was not Marshal Garrett. This man was younger, maybe 30, clean-shaven. He raised his hand in greeting when he reached the clearing. "Lucas Mountain Heart," the man called out. "Jane Lowell." "I come with news from Flagstaff," Lucas stood, walked to the edge of the porch. "What kind of news?" The rider dismounted, tied his horse to the post near the water trough. He pulled an envelope from his saddlebag, walked up to the porch, and handed it to Lucas. "I am Deputy Marshal Connor Hayes. Marshal Garrett retired last month. Asked me to deliver this personally." Lucas opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Garrett's careful handwriting. He read it slowly, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he handed it to Jane. She read it too, her hands trembling slightly. The letter explained that all the land disputes Judge Marcus Hawley had orchestrated were being resolved. 43 families had been compensated. Deeds had been returned. Water rights restored. The territorial governor had issued a formal apology. And a monument was being erected in Prescott to honor the victims of Hale's corruption, including federal surveyor Thomas Brennan. But the letter also contained something else. An invitation. The territorial governor wanted Lucas and Jane to attend the dedication ceremony. Wanted them to speak, to tell their story, to stand as living proof that justice could still prevail. Jane looked up at Deputy Marshal Hayes. "When is the ceremony?" 3 weeks, Hayes answered. "In Prescott. The governor himself will be there, along with representatives from every county in the territory. It is a big moment. A chance to show that corruption will not be tolerated. That ordinary people have the power to change things." Lucas folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. We will think about it. Hayes nodded. Marshal Garrett hoped you would say yes. He said to tell you that your story matters. That people need to hear it. Especially now, Jane stood. Especially now. What does that mean? Hayes hesitated, then said, there are other places like Prescott. Other counties where powerful men believe they are above the law. Your testimony helped bring down Judge Hawley, but it also inspired others to come forward. To fight back. The governor wants to build on that momentum. Show the whole territory that change is possible. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, we will let you know. Hayes tipped his hat. That is all I can ask. If you decide to come, send word to the marshal's office in Flagstaff. We will make sure you have safe passage. He mounted his horse, rode back down the trail. Jane and Lucas watched until he disappeared into the trees. Then they returned to their chairs on the porch. The coffee had gone cold. Neither of them cared. Do you want to go? Lucas asked. Jane stared out at the valley. At the aspens turning gold. At the mountains rising beyond. Part of me does. Part of me wants to stand in that town square and show everyone that I survived. That I did not let Judge Hawley break me. That I am still here. She paused. Took a breath. But another part of me never wants to see Prescott again. Never wants to remember what happened there. What it felt like to hang from that post. What it felt like to believe I was going to die. Lucas reached over. Took her hand. We do not have to go. We do not owe anyone anything. We already did what needed to be done. Jane looked at him. What do you think we should do? Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think my mother would tell us to go. She would say that our story is not just ours anymore. That it belongs to everyone who has ever suffered under corrupt power. Everyone who has ever felt powerless. Everyone who needs to believe that fighting back is worth it. Jane nodded slowly. Your mother was a wise woman. She was, Lucas agreed. And she taught me that courage is not about never being afraid. It is about doing what is right, even when you are terrified. Even when every instinct tells you to run. Jane squeezed his hand. Then we go. We tell our story. And we show them that even the smallest voice can change everything if someone is brave enough to listen. The next 3 weeks passed quickly. Lucas and Jane prepared for the journey. They packed supplies, checked their horses, made arrangements with Samuel Greyhawk's family to watch the cabin while they were gone. The night before they left, they sat on the porch one last time. Are you afraid? Jane asked. Lucas nodded. Yes, but not of going back to Prescott. I am afraid that our story will not matter. That people will listen and then forget. That nothing will really change. Jane leaned her head against his shoulder. Maybe nothing will change everywhere. But it already changed for us. And for the 43 families who got their land back. And for everyone who watched Judge Hawley hang and realized that power does not make someone untouchable. Lucas wrapped his arm around her. When did you become so wise? Jane laughed. I learned from a stubborn Modoc hunter who refused to walk past a woman dying in the sun. Who taught me that one person can make a difference. Even when the odds are impossible. They rode out at dawn. The journey to Prescott took 4 days. They traveled slowly, stopping each night to camp under the stars. They passed through towns where people recognized them, where stories of their fight against Judge Hawley had become legend. Some people offered them meals. Others just nodded with respect. A few asked if it was true, if they had really brought down one of the most powerful men in the territory. Jane always answered the same way. We did what anyone should do when they see injustice. We fought back. And we did not stop until the truth came out. When they finally reached Prescott, the town looked different. Cleaner somehow. The streets were lined with flags. Banners hung from buildings announcing the dedication ceremony. People moved through the square with purpose. with hope. The shadow that Judge Haley had cast over this place was finally lifting. They were met at the edge of town by Deputy Marshal Hayes and a small escort. Hayes led them to a hotel near the courthouse. "The governor has reserved rooms for you. The ceremony is tomorrow at noon." In the town square, Jane looked out the window of her room. She could see the square from here. Could see the spot where the whipping post had stood. It was gone now, removed. In its place was a large stone monument, still covered with canvas, waiting to be unveiled. That night, Jane could not sleep. She stood at the window, staring down at the square, remembering. Lucas found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You do not have to do this tomorrow. We can leave. No one would blame you." Jane shook her head. "No, I need to do this. I need to stand in that square and show everyone that I am still here. That I survived. That he did not win." Lucas pulled her close. "He did not win. You beat him. The moment you refused to stay silent. The moment you stole those maps and decided to fight. That was when he lost." The next morning dawned clear and bright. By 11 o'clock, the square was filled with people. Hundreds of them. Maybe more. They came from all over the territory. Families who had been victims of Judge Hale's corruption. Journalists from newspapers in Tucson and Phoenix. Officials from the territorial government. And ordinary people who just wanted to witness history. A platform had been built in the center of the square. The territorial governor stood on it. Tall, distinguished, gray-haired. Beside him were territorial judges, military officers, and Marshal William Garrett. Garrett had retired, but he came back for this. To see the end of the story he had helped write. Lucas and Jane were escorted to the platform. They stood at the back, watching as the governor addressed the crowd. His voice carried across the square, strong, clear, full of conviction. 2 years ago, this town was under the grip of corruption. A man who was supposed to uphold the law used it instead as a weapon. He stole land. He murdered an innocent federal employee. And he tortured a young woman who dared to expose his crimes. The governor paused. Let his words sink in. But that young woman refused to die. And a hunter who could have walked away chose instead to fight. Together, they brought evidence to the territorial marshal. Together, they testified in court. And together, they proved that no one is above the law. Not even a judge. The crowd erupted in applause. Jane felt tears streaming down her face. Lucas squeezed her hand. The governor continued. Today we dedicate this monument to all the victims of corruption. To federal surveyor Thomas Brennan, who died trying to protect the rights of innocent families. And to every person who suffered under the rule of Marcus Hawley. This monument stands as a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied. 2 men pulled the canvas from the monument. Beneath it was a stone pillar, 8 feet tall, carved with names. Thomas Brennan at the top. Below him, the names of every family who had lost land, every person who had been threatened or intimidated. And at the very bottom, in simple letters, in honor of those who fought back, the governor turned to Lucas and Jane. Would you like to say something? Jane looked at Lucas. He nodded. She stepped forward, her legs shaking, her heart pounding. She looked out at the crowd, at all those faces staring back at her, and she remembered what it felt like to hang in this square, to believe she was going to die alone and forgotten. Her voice was quiet at first. Then it grew stronger. 2 years ago, I stood in this square in chains. I had been whipped, beaten, left to die. And I believed that no one cared. That no one would help me. That the world had decided I was not worth saving. She paused, wiped her eyes. But I was wrong. Because a man I had never met saw me suffering and refused to look away. He cut me down. He risked his life to protect me. And he believed me when I told him the truth. Even when that truth put both of us in danger. She looked at Lucas. That man taught me something I will never forget. He taught me that one person can change everything. That courage is not about being fearless. It is about doing what is right, even when you are terrified. Even when everyone tells you it is impossible. Her voice rang out across the square now, strong, unshakable. If you see someone suffering, do not walk away. If you witness injustice, do not stay silent. If you have the power to help, use it. Because that is how the world changes. One act of courage at a time. One person standing up. One voice speaking truth. The crowd was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole square erupted. People cheered. Some cried. Others just stood there, absorbing what Jane had said. Letting it sink into their hearts, Lucas stepped forward. He did not say much. That was not his way. But what he said mattered. My mother was Modoc. She taught me that we are all connected. That when one person suffers, we all suffer. And that healing begins when we choose compassion over cruelty. Justice over power. Truth over silence. He looked at Jane. This woman saved herself. I just gave her the chance to do it. And in doing so, she saved me too. Because I learned that my life has meaning when I use it to help others. That is the only legacy worth leaving, the ceremony continued. More speeches. More applause. But Jane barely heard any of it. She stood on that platform, in the square where she had nearly died. And she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt whole. After the ceremony, people approached them, shook their hands, thanked them, shared their own stories of surviving corruption and abuse. An old Yavapai woman with tears in her eyes took Jane's hands. My grandson has his land back because of you. Because you were brave. Thank you. A young man, maybe 20, stepped forward. I want to be like you. I want to fight for what is right. Even when it is hard, Jane smiled. Then do it. Do not wait for someone else. Do not wait for permission. Just do what you know is right. As the sun began to set, Lucas and Jane walked through the town one last time. They stopped at the monument. Read the names carved into the stone. Thomas Brennan. Samuel Gray Hawk, the 43 families. All the people who had been hurt by one man's greed and cruelty. Do you think this will last? Jane asked. Do you think people will remember? Lucas looked at the monument. At the solid stone. At the names that would endure for generations. Some will remember. Some will forget. But that is not what matters. What matters is that we tried. That we fought. That we proved it was possible. Jane nodded. Then it was worth it. All of it. The pain. The fear. The running. It was worth it. They left Prescott the next morning. Rode back north to the high country. To the cabin. To the life they had built together. They never returned to Prescott again. Never needed to. Their work there was done, but their story lived on. It was told around campfires and dinner tables. It was written about in newspapers and journals. It inspired other people to stand up, to fight back, to refuse to accept corruption as normal years later. When Lucas was an old man and Jane's hair had turned silver, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset. Sometimes young people would come to visit, would ask them what it was like, would ask them how they found the courage, and Jane would always give the same answer. Courage is not something you find. It is something you choose. You choose it in the moment when everything inside you is screaming to run. You choose it when you see someone suffering and you decide you cannot walk away. You choose it when you realize that staying silent makes you part of the problem. Lucas would add, and you do not need to be a hero. You just need to be human. To care about others. to believe that every life has value. That is all it takes to change the world. They died within 6 months of each other. Lucas went first, peacefully in his sleep. Jane followed soon after. Some said she died of grief. Others said she died because her work was done. That she had lived long enough to see justice prevail. Long enough to know that their sacrifice mattered. The cabin in the high country still stands. It is maintained now by the Territorial Historical Society, a place where people can visit and remember, where they can learn about the woman who refused to die and the man who refused to let her, where they can see that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage. And in Prescott, the monument still stands too, weathered by rain and snow and sun, but unbroken, enduring, a reminder that justice is fragile, that it must be fought for, protected, defended by every generation. This is the story of Jane Lowell and Lucas Mountainheart. A story of survival, of courage, of two people who prove that, even in the darkest moments, hope exists. As long as someone is willing to fight for it. The autumn air in the high country carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. Lucas stood on the porch of the cabin he had built over the past 2 years. It was larger now than the simple trapper's shelter it had been. 2 rooms instead of 1. A proper kitchen with a cast-iron stove. Windows that caught the morning light. A porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. Jane emerged from inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her hair was longer now, tied back with a strip of leather. Her face had filled out. The hollow, haunted look that had lived in her eyes for so long was gone, replaced by something that looked like contentment. She handed 1 cup to Lucas and settled into the chair beside him. "The aspens are turning early this year," she said. "We might get snow before November," Lucas nodded. He sipped his coffee, black, strong. "I need to finish cutting firewood before the first storm," Jane smiled. "You always worry about the first storm. And we always have more than enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the valley below turn gold and orange as the sun climbed higher. A hawk circled overhead. 2 years ago, Jane would have flinched at the sight of a predator. Now she just watched it with appreciation. A rider appeared on the trail leading up to the cabin. Lucas set down his cup. His hand moved toward the rifle. But Jane touched his arm. "Wait, look at the way he sits. That is not someone coming with trouble." The rider moved slowly, deliberately. As he drew closer, Lucas saw the badge pinned to his vest. Territorial Marshal. He raised his hand in greeting when he reached the clearing. "Lucas Mountainheart. Jane Lowell." "I come with news from Flagstaff," the man called out. Lucas stood, walked to the edge of the porch. "What kind of news?" The rider dismounted, pulled an envelope from his saddlebag. "I am Deputy Marshal Connor Hayes. Marshal Garrett retired last month. Asked me to deliver this personally." Lucas opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Garrett's handwriting. He read it slowly. When he finished, he handed it to Jane. Her hands trembled slightly. The letter explained that all the land disputes Judge Marcus Halle had orchestrated were being resolved. 43 families had been compensated, deeds returned, water rights restored, and a monument was being erected in Prescott to honor the victims, including federal surveyor Thomas Brennan. The letter also contained an invitation. The territorial governor wanted Lucas and Jane to attend the dedication ceremony. Wanted them to speak, to tell their story. Jane looked up at Hayes. "When is the ceremony?" 3 weeks, Hayes answered. "In Prescott. The governor himself will be there. It is a big moment. A chance to show that corruption will not be tolerated. That ordinary people have the power to change things." Lucas folded the letter. "We will think about it," Hayes nodded. "Marshal Garrett hoped you would say yes. He said your story matters. That people need to hear it. Especially now." Jane stood, Especially now. What does that mean? Hayes hesitated. There are other places like Prescott. Other counties where powerful men believe they are above the law. Your testimony helped bring down Judge Hawley, but it also inspired others to come forward. The governor wants to build on that momentum. Lucas was quiet for a moment. We will let you know. Hayes mounted his horse and rode back down the trail. Jane and Lucas returned to their chairs. The coffee had gone cold. You want to go? Lucas asked. Jane stared at the valley. Part of me does. Part of me wants to stand in that town square and show everyone I survived. That I am still here. She paused. But another part of me never wants to see Prescott again. Never wants to remember what happened there. Lucas took her hand. We do not have to go. We do not owe anyone anything. Jane looked at him. What do you think we should do? Lucas was quiet for a long time. I think my mother would tell us to go. She would say our story belongs to everyone who has ever suffered under corrupt power. Everyone who needs to believe that fighting back is worth it. Jane squeezed his hand. Then we go. We tell our story. And we show them that even the smallest voice can change everything. The next 3 weeks passed quickly. Lucas and Jane prepared for the journey. They packed supplies, checked their horses, made arrangements with Samuel Greyhawk's family to watch the cabin. The night before they left, they sat on the porch one last time. Are you afraid? Jane asked. Lucas nodded. Yes, but not of going back to Prescott. I am afraid our story will not matter. That people will listen and then forget. Jane leaned her head against his shoulder. Maybe nothing will change everywhere. But it already changed for us. And for the 43 families who got their land back. And for everyone who realized that power does not make someone untouchable. They rode out at dawn. The journey to Prescott took 4 days. They traveled slowly, stopping each night to camp under the stars. They passed through towns where people recognized them, where stories of their fight against Judge Hawley had become legend. Some offered them meals. Others nodded with respect. Jane always answered the same way when asked. We did what anyone should do when they see injustice. We fought back. And we did not stop until the truth came out. When they reached Prescott, the town looked different. The streets were lined with flags. Banners hung from buildings. People moved through the square with purpose, with hope. The shadow that Judge Hawley had cast was finally lifting. Deputy Marshal Hayes met them at the edge of town. He led them to a hotel near the courthouse. The governor has reserved rooms for you. The ceremony is tomorrow at noon. In the town square, Jane looked out her window. She could see the square, could see the spot where the whipping post had stood. It was gone now. In its place was a large stone monument, still covered with canvas, waiting to be unveiled. That night, Jane could not sleep. She stood at the window, staring down at the square, remembering. Lucas found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You do not have to do this tomorrow. We can leave. Jane shook her head. No, I need to do this. I need to stand in that square and show everyone that I survived, that he did not win. Lucas pulled her close. He did not win. You beat him the moment you refused to stay silent. The moment you stole those maps and decided to fight. The next morning dawned clear and bright. By 11 o'clock, the square was filled with people. Hundreds of them. They came from all over the territory. Families who had been victims, journalists, officials, and ordinary people who wanted to witness history. A platform had been built in the center of the square. The territorial governor stood on it. Beside him were territorial judges, military officers, and Marshal William Garrett. Lucas and Jane were escorted to the platform. They stood at the back as the governor addressed the crowd. 2 years ago, this town was under the grip of corruption. A man who was supposed to uphold the law used it as a weapon. He stole land. He murdered an innocent federal employee. And he tortured a young woman who dared to expose his crimes. The governor paused. But that young woman refused to die. And a hunter who could have walked away chose instead to fight. Together, they brought evidence to the marshal. Together, they testified in court. And together, they proved that no one is above the law. The crowd erupted in applause. The governor continued. Today, we dedicate this monument to all the victims of corruption. To Federal Surveyor Thomas Brennan. And to every person who suffered under Marcus Hall. This monument reminds us that justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied. 2 men pulled the canvas from the monument. A stone pillar 8 feet tall, carved with names. Thomas Brennan at the top. Below him, the names of every family who had lost land. At the bottom, in honor of those who fought back, the governor turned to Lucas and Jane. Would you like to say something? Jane stepped forward, her legs shaking. She looked out at the crowd, and she remembered what it felt like to hang in this square. To believe she was going to die. Her voice was quiet at first. Then it grew stronger. 2 years ago, I stood in this square in chains. I had been whipped, beaten, left to die. And I believed that no one cared. That no one would help me. She paused, wiped her eyes. But I was wrong. Because a man I had never met saw me suffering and refused to look away. He cut me down. He risked his life to protect me. And he believed me when I told him the truth. She looked at Lucas. That man taught me that one person can change everything. That courage is not about being fearless. It is about doing what is right, even when you are terrified. Her voice rang out across the square. If you see someone suffering, do not walk away. If you witness injustice, do not stay silent. If you have the power to help, use it. Because that is how the world changes. One act of courage at a time. The crowd was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole square erupted. People cheered. Some cried. Lucas stepped forward. My mother was Modoc. She taught me that we are all connected. That when one person suffers, we all suffer. And that healing begins when we choose compassion over cruelty. Justice over power. Truth over silence. He looked at Jane. This woman saved herself. I just gave her the chance to do it. And in doing so, she saved me too. Because I learned that my life has meaning when I use it to help others. After the ceremony, people approached them, shook their hands, thanked them. An old Yavapai woman with tears in her eyes took Jane's hands. My grandson has his land back because of you. Thank you, a young man stepped forward. I want to be like you. I want to fight for what is right, Jane smiled. Then do it. Do not wait for someone else. Just do what you know is right. As the sun began to set, Lucas and Jane walked through the town one last time. They stopped at the monument. Read the names carved into stone. Do you think people will remember? Jane asked. Lucas looked at the monument. Some will. Some will not. But what matters is that we tried. That we proved it was possible, Jane nodded. Then it was worth it. All of it. They left Prescott the next morning. Rode back north to the high country. To the cabin. To the life they had built together. They never returned. Their work was done, but their story lived on. It was told around campfires and dinner tables. It inspired other people to stand up, to fight back. In 3 other counties, witnesses came forward with evidence against corrupt officials. Changes were made. Laws were strengthened. Years later, when they were old, young people would come to visit, would ask them how they found the courage. Jane would always answer, courage is not something you find. It is something you choose. You choose it when you see someone suffering and decide you cannot walk away. Lucas would add, you do not need to be a hero. You just need to be human. To care about others. That is all it takes to change the world. They died within 6 months of each other. Lucas went first, peacefully in his sleep. Jane followed soon after. The cabin still stands today, maintained by the Territorial Historical Society, a place where people can remember, and in Prescott, the monument still stands, weathered but unbroken. A reminder that justice must be fought for, protected, defended by every generation. This is the story of Jane Lowell and Lucas Mountainheart. A story proving that even in the darkest moments, hope exists. That even when the powerful seem untouchable, they can be held accountable, as long as someone is willing to stand up. As long as someone refuses to look away. As long as someone chooses courage over comfort, the world can change. One person at a time. One act of courage at a time.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.